David Matas and I are accused of being anti-China. In fact, we are strongly pro-China and the people of China. I had the honor to represent several thousand of them in Parliament for 27 years, and believe me, I have the utmost respect for China and the people of China and the people who have been forced to leave or have left voluntarily from China. I guess you can see I mentioned the fact that periodically groups get picked on. The group that's been probably picked on the worst is Falun Gong. David has already told you that we found 52 kinds of evidence. I was a prosecutor for 10 years. I should know something about evidence. And you may say, well, give us 52. We're not going to give you 52. David's mentioned 3 or 4. One I would mention is a wife of a surgeon in Sujiatan, also in Bo Xilai's territory, if I can put it that way. She was told by her husband that he had removed the corneas from the eyes of 2,000 Falun Gong practitioners over a 2-year period. He was paid the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of US dollars for that. Ultimately, he was having nightmares, you can understand, and she got him to stop. He left the country and apparently came to Canada, of all places, but he wouldn't talk to David Matas and I, for obvious reasons, and she went to the US. That's one. If you don't like that one, there are 51 others, and you've heard 3 or 4 others referred to by David. Yeah, that's the book. We came, I don't think this was mentioned, David, I don't think you mentioned, we came to the figure of 41,000, you mentioned it, Ethan, 41,500 transplants during a 5-year period we think, have to have come from Falun Gong. It's a lot of human lives. Incidentally, the way the system works is that, let's say you want a liver, I'm sorry to pick on you, but you basically fly to Shanghai, #1 People's Hospital in Shanghai. They do, a surgeon, in fact, including military surgeons in uniform, come to see you. They take your blood type, your tissue type. They check their computer records, and some poor guy out in forced labor camp 55, for example, is dragged into an operating room, given a light anesthetic, and is, of course, killed. And the organs are then flown to you in Shanghai in a People's Liberation Army plane. You're told probably told you're getting the organs of a convicted murderer or something. They're not completely stupid about how they do this. And so you come home having spent $60 or $70 or whatever $1,000 to get this organ. And somebody, and as you heard from various speakers, there's a very good chance the person's a Falun Gong practitioner who's been convicted of nothing, nada. And he's dead, and somebody's got a new organ. And whether it's a Canadian or a Scot or whoever, it's pretty hideous stuff. Yeah, you've heard about references to state organs. You've heard Ethan's estimates. I won't bore you with that, or not bore you. I won't stop with that. Yeah, the Falun Gong community, neither David or I are Falun Gong practitioners, but I assure you we've met practitioners in something like, 60 countries? And we have the utmost respect for the Falun Gong practitioners. They have never used any violence. They are persecuted mercilessly, and some of the most wonderful people I've met are Falun Gong practitioners, and I can think of many of them who've been through absolute hell. There's a reference here to I think somebody said it, to the fact that they basically, after Mao, they said you can pay for the health system by your fees, and so and you can imagine these operations became a source of extra income. We visited about a dozen countries to interview Falun Gong practitioners, and the stories we heard, working 16 hours a day, no pay, little food, crowded sleeping conditions, torture, constant torture. And the amazing thing is they made a range of export products, everything from chopsticks to slippers, Homer Simpson slippers, to shirts, all kinds of things, Christmas decorations. And ladies and gentlemen, probably some of us have bought these things, and they're being brought by international companies that buy these things and then sell them in the West. So as I say, we should all have legislation that bans products made by forced labor, and it's enforced legislation. The U.S. has an agreement, as Ethan knows, but they just don't bother to enforce it. So it would be nice if we could maybe pay some attention to the jobs of Scots or Brits or Canadians or other people who've lost their jobs to this kind of forced labor practice. I've got a section here on engagement. I'm not saying don't engage with China. Engage, but constantly push to try to get them to stop this. And I also say, it may surprise you, that I think that democracy with very Chinese characteristics is a lot closer than people think. And that why don't we stand up for universal values, equality for all citizens and so on, the rule of law. I wish all of us would do that more often. Foreign investors, I'll skip the foreign investor section, this time is short, but one example that's used is that McDonald's opened their first outlet in Beijing. They were given a 20-year lease in a good location, and 2 years later they were told to get out because Li Ka-shing wanted to build a building there. So if McDonald's is treated that way, you can imagine how most people are treated. And I give the example of a family I know in Edmonton who vested their life savings in a pharmaceutical business and near Beijing. And after about a year and a half, the mayor of the city, who had used to manage the company, pulled enough levers under the table so that their business was soon lost, and they lost every penny of their investment. I wonder how many Scots have had that happen to them in investments. The Sino Forest was delisted on the Toronto Stock Exchange. About 50 Chinese companies have been delisted by the SEC. We're getting tired of toxic foods, poisonous food, and the theft of intellectual property. I'll skip the dead pig thing in the river. Ponzi capitalism. I wish this text, by the way, will be on my website probably tonight if you don't mind. It's just davidkilgour.com. And this man, whose picture you can see, could see, Clive Ansley practiced law in Shanghai for 13 years. And what finally caused him to leave was that, as he says here, there's a saying amongst Chinese lawyers and judges who truly believe in the rule of law, and many of them do. Those who hear the case do not make the judgment, and those who make the judgment have not heard the case. In other words, I think it's on a Wednesday, in any court, the party judges, they're all party judges, but the key party judges decide the decision in this case will be this, the penalty will be that. So the poor man or woman judge who gets up and seems to be listening to the evidence basically reads out what's been decided by people who haven't heard a scintilla of the evidence. And the other factor that made him leave was that apparently an email went out to the 200,000 judges in China saying that in future no foreigner was to win a case in the Chinese courts. So at that point, Clive came back to Canada to practice. Yeah, this one you might enjoy. My hero, and I hope yours, the late Václav Havel, was told that if he allowed the Dalai Lama to go to Prague, that he would never do another bit of business with China. Well, knowing Václav Havel, he made sure the Dalai Lama did come, and apparently it made no difference whatsoever to check business with China. And as I say here, bluster aside, the party in Beijing appears to respect those who stand up for universal values. There's a section here on international initiatives to deal with this issue. The UN actually, some of the agents, the rapporteurs have been extremely helpful to us. Manfred Novak has been, the rapporteur on torture, as I said here, has been extremely helpful. I'll skip that because you can get the text if you wanted. European Parliament they have had hearings in 2013, 2006 they had hearings, as I say there. They raised the issue with the Chinese foreign minister at their annual summit. Australia, as I mentioned earlier, is really quite exciting, both what they've done nationally and what they've done are doing, hopefully, at New South Wales. Taiwan is, the lawyers, the Taipei Bar Association passed a resolution condemning organ tourism in China. Canada, I'll skip that because these are some of our MPs who have been very helpful on this issue. France, I guess I better refer to Valerie Boyer, who had a bill which is explained. I don't know whether you want to say something about that when you get. Okay. Well, it was just basically this: every French resident who undergoes an organ transplant has to acquire within 30 days a certificate saying the organ was donated without payment. And really, that's all you have to. You don't even have to name China if you pass a bill in your parliament. Just say that nobody in Scotland can get an organ at home or abroad for which they pay. And the Chinese consulate can't come and see you because you haven't even named China in your bill. And that's what I believe the New South Wales bill will end up looking like. It won't name China either. But the fact is there's only one country where this kind of thing happens, and that's, I guess you know. Actually, Israel's been the most successful on this. They, as I think you heard, were actually paying people to go to China, paying their cost of the organs, and then Dr. Jay Lavie, who's one of my heroes, discovered what was going on, and he's a transplant surgeon. He got the Knesset to pass this law, and there hasn't been a single Israeli has gone to China since 2009. And I think they put a couple of organ brokers in jail, and it's been a huge success, this legislation. U.S., you've heard about that. I'll skip that. Yeah, you've heard enough about Wang and Bo Xilai, my two least favorite characters. Okay, that's probably, there's a whole bunch of NGOs that have done things. This is my latest heroine, is Maria Singh, is a professor of geriatrics at the University of Sydney. David did an interview with Australian Broadcasting this morning. She has basically said that why did University of Sydney give 2 honorary professorships to Wang Jifo, the former Deputy Minister of Health, when he admits that he's been doing, I think it's 100 liver transplants a year for, I don't know how many years, but a lot of years. And this man, who under the Australian legislation might be liable for a 12-year sentence, is an honorary professor of the University of Sydney twice. So she, David, and myself, and about 20 other people have written a letter asking the Vice Rector of the University of Sydney to explain this, and he hasn't given an answer yet, which is either encouraging or discouraging. Okay, I'll skip over the individual initiative. Here he is. How many of you, by the way, were aware of Wang? Nobody before, or nobody in the audience? Well, he's not gone. He's taking part in a new transplantation system they're setting up. So okay, I'm just about finished, Mr. Moderator. Yeah, corporate social responsibility, there's a section on that. I understand your pharmaceutical industry is very important in Scotland. Anyone here work for Roche? Glad to hear that. So we would all encourage legislators to consider our recommendations, including, which won't surprise any of you, to try to get the party state in China to stop repressing Falun Gong, stop organ pillaging, get the military out of the transplant business. They make a lot of money out of it, I gather. Free Gao Zhisheng and so on. Until it stops, please stop allowing MDs from Scotland or anywhere else to travel to China to give training in transplant surgery, or letting Chinese doctors come here to train for transplant surgery. How about, and I hope this happens, blocking in your medical journals articles about transplants in China? Pharmaceutical companies in Scotland and elsewhere should be barred from exporting to China any drugs used solely in transplant surgery. So, I guess in conclusion, it seems to me you could enact in your parliament under the health devolution measures to combat this organ transplant abuses, and I hope you'll do it. Yeah, I must admit I used this argument in Australia because people said, well, we do so much trade with China, and I know Scotland does a lot of trade with Scotland, but I put it to you this way, that if we were in the 70s now, and some people from Scotland were going to Cambodia, I don't know how many Scots are going to China, but I gather it's some. And in the 70s, people said, well, I'm going to Cambodia for an organ, to the killing fields of Cambodia. How many Scots would not say that has got to stop immediately? I bet you it would be 100. I hope it would be 100%. So whether it's a few or a lot, it's no doubt a few in Scotland that are going to China. I wish we had legislation that would keep people from going. Okay, that's probably a good place to stop. Thank you very much.